Morning, Legacy students. It's Mr. Cuevas coming to you guys from the Bible room. We have 2 more days of these devotionals, day 9 and 10, before I start your live Zoom Bible classes with you guys this coming week, which I'm looking forward to and I hope you are too. So anyway, if you haven't listened to day 8 devotional from last Friday, listen to that one before you listen to this one, because this one kind of goes along with that one. So again, if you haven't listened to day 8's, turn off this video and go back to Friday's devotional from March 27th and listen to that one first. So if you have, continue on, and because the previous devotional was from Proverbs 16:9, which says that the mind of a man plans his way, but the Lord directs his steps. And so I want to bring a verse that balances that out, which is from Proverbs 16:3, same chapter, and just a few verses before that, which says, again, Proverbs 16:3, that's for today. It says, commit your works to the Lord and your plans will be established. Again, commit your works to the Lord and your plans will be established. Now, from the previous lesson that we had last Friday, one of the things that you learn, one of the things that a wise man has to constantly be aware of is that life will not always go according to plan, because even though a man might plan out his life in a certain way, it's God who ultimately directs his steps and brings him to certain parts of life and lets life happen the way he intends it for it to happen, which is a lot of times different from the way we've planned it. Now, here's the main question, because it's true that life doesn't always happen according to plan. And that way, and by the way, this isn't just for this shelter at home time. This is for all of life. And so when you listen to this, okay, think about not just how you're going to get through this time, but also how you're going to think about the rest of your life moving forward. Because the main question you want to ask yourself is, do you want to live a life that's just full of ruined plans? Do you want to live a life where you're constantly planning things and it constantly gets ruined and you end up in frustration? Or do you want to live a life, generally speaking, right? Not 100%, obviously, but do you want to live a life that is filled with plans that are actually fulfilled, right? And that's a happy man, that's a wise man, that's a content man, right? Someone who, generally speaking, plans life, and life happens according to plan. And God actually gives us wisdom as to how to make that happen. Because the truth is that even though sometimes God directs life in a way that's different from what we've planned, God also told us that hope deferred, right? In other words, when you hope for something and it doesn't happen, that makes the heart sick. And so if you want to be a sick person in your heart, if you want to be emotionally sick, then live a life where you're constantly hoping for things that don't happen. And so it's not in God's will for you to be constantly and continually frustrated with life. In other words, God's design for us as his children is not for us to have all these plans only for every single one of them to get ruined all the time, right? That's not what life is supposed to be like. It happens occasionally, right? And it happens according to God's wisdom, but that's not supposed to be the norm. God actually wants us to live lives where the things that we plan actually get fulfilled, and that brings him glory, that brings us joy, right? Even Jesus said, right, ask for certain things in my name and he'll fulfill it. And so what's the answer to that, right? How can you live life in such a way? What's wisdom, right? Such that if you live life this way, then the things that you plan for, the way you plan life, actually happens. And the answer is found in this verse. I'll read it for the third time. Commit your works to the Lord, and your plans will be established. So here's the answer. The answer to this question is, your plans will be fulfilled, generally speaking, if you commit all of your ways, all of the things that you do, your entire life, if you commit those things to God and his work. It's a simple answer. It's a difficult answer, because we as human beings tend to want to live for ourselves. We love ourselves. No one has to teach us to love ourselves. We want things for ourselves. And it's easy to look at God as some kind of a genie who gives us, who can give us whatever we want because he's all powerful. And yet we forget that God isn't only all powerful, but he's the Lord of the earth. The earth exists for him. We exist for him. And our works, the things that he gives us, actually exist for him. And so the way to live a life in such a way that your plans are fulfilled is to give everything that you do and to do everything that you do for God and for God alone. It's to commit your works. Again, your works is everything you do, whether it's your studies, whether it's your work, whether it's your relationships, whether it's your free time. Commit all those things to the Lord and his work, and your plans will be fulfilled. And one thing you have to remember is that God is involved right now in doing a work that is far beyond the walls of our own lives, right? And that's why we went through that series last semester called Chosen Vessels of Redemption. And one of the things that I wanted you guys to see with all these different Bible characters is that these men and women existed for more than just themselves. God used them for more than just their own lives. He used them for a work that extended beyond their lives, beyond their country, beyond their region, and beyond their generation, right? And God is involved in this great work of saving people, the great work of redemption that started from the Garden of Eden and is extending all the way through current history, and that's going to go all the way till the end times. And that's this big, great work of salvation, of redemption, and he wants us to be, he's giving us the privilege of being involved in that work. And so when we commit our lives to God's work, God's greater work, when we give everything that we have to God and his kingdom, he promises that the plans that we have for life are going to be fulfilled. And so if you give your work to God and everything that you do to God, and you stop living selfishly, right? You stop living in a self-centered, self-absorbed, life is only about me manner. God promises this, that you'll start to see the things that you're planning for actually come to fruition. And so this is a good time, I think, for you to reflect and be honest with yourself, right? Because only you can answer this. Everyone can say I'm living for God, but you know in your heart if you truly are. And so it's a good time to ask yourself, like, have you really given yourself to the Lord's work, right? It can't just be about you believing that Jesus can save you, but then you refusing to give your whole life to him. Because following Jesus is about, number one, believing that what he's done can save us and will save us, his work on the cross, his death and his resurrection. But it's also about giving our entire lives to following him. I mean, you remember what Jesus said to Peter, follow me, right? And I'll make you fishers of men. And so for us, to be a Christian, right? To be God's child involves trusting him entirely, not believing in ourselves, not looking to our own works to save us. But on the other hand, it also involves giving all of our works, everything we do, to God, to God's purposes, to God's greater work. And now's a good time to examine, whether or not that's really where your heart is. And if it isn't, then know that God's calling you to do that, and the time is now. And if it is, if you have honestly given your whole life to following God, then you can rest assured that in time, the things that you have planned in some way, shape, or form, maybe not in the way you necessarily pictured it, God will actually bring your plans to fruition. And so that's what I have for you today. We've got one more day of devotionals before we start this Zoom Bible class, and I'm looking forward to that. God bless you, and have a good start to week number 3 of Shelter at Home.